Harkness, Deputy City Manager. I get to do the challenges slide here. So I just want to set a little bit of the context before we dive in. First of all, we had a highly effective fire response. Every time I have an opportunity to work deeply with our fire department, I walk away impressed with their level of professionalism and capability in responding quickly and effectively to a situation like this. If I recall correctly, we actually had folks out on the balcony that they were rescued, and the swiftness with which this fire moved was only matched by the swiftness with which our response. So the good news is we were able to get everybody out of there with no major injuries and certainly no deaths in this case. We also activated the Emergency Operations Center for an operational period, not to support the response, which, as I said, was very swift and effective, but to begin to support the recovery. And in that, we realized we had what I would call a Goldilocks problem, right? The fire department and our partners in the American Red Cross and housing are very used to, unfortunately, and very capable of dealing with the small fires where 1 or 2 or 3 people are displaced, or it's a household or two, and their existing process is effective. When it comes to very, very large events, as we know, we've put a lot of investment into getting effective in an event where we'd have to mass care and shelter people in the case of a large disaster, and our capabilities in that regard are increased. But there's a little bit in this middle area here where it's not 1 or 2 households, nor is it a full-scale disaster, where we were missing some capabilities on the recovery side. And just to paint a little bit of a picture of it, the apartment complex is subject to both Council Policy 1720 and also the rent ordinance. And this provides some obligation on the part of the landlord to actually care for the residents. And so, but we hadn't used that policy in practice very much and hadn't implemented it. So at one point in my role as the director of the Emergency Operations Center, we were actually in City Hall at this point, but I convened everybody who needed to be in the room to figure this out. And we had, if I remember correctly, 27 people in that room for several hours trying to figure out of who was the chain of who needed to inspect what and who needed to make what call and who needed to tag what, under what ordinance could we help and who is responsible for this, all the while that we have people who are displaced and in need of urgent care. And again, kudos to both Housing and Red Cross, all the while we were providing urgent care and support to them, but having to figure out our own processes in an extremely complicated way. I recall one of my favorite playwrights, wrote a play once, and the title of the play was Pounding Nails into the Floor with My Forehead. And that process to me was somewhat akin to that. And in the end, we got the floor done, but I'm pretty clear there are more effective ways to do flooring than what we did on that day. And so we tasked ourselves in our after-action report with several key improvements to the process and the approach. And the story that's being told now, and the good work of others, begins to address key elements of that after-action report with, in this case, a startup in residence as part of the solution. So I'll turn it back over to the team who did the real work to talk through the solution that they came up with and how they approached it.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Dess, Mr. Chair, committee members, and members of the public. My name is Ken Nuss, and I am the VP of Sales for Gwentify here in North America. I'm going to be showing everyone a brief sample of our app today, and it's going to show you the disaster response system as we have it and how it's going to be used in the field by the fire department. I'm going to start by setting the scene that the fire department is actually dispatched to a structure fire at an apartment complex in a residential area. Obviously, the fire department is going to arrive on scene. They're going to put out the fire, or at the very least, get it under control, at which time the battalion chief is going to open up the app on his or her smart device. Let's see. So once the app opens up, twice, hold on. Once the app, technology, okay. Once the app opens up, it's going to geolocate the incident location on a 3D map. The battalion chief will then open up the form and be able to fill out the information. Section 1 is just about the location information itself. Section 2 is going to touch on the structure. And again, you can see how fast it's able to be done. And Section 3 is going to be about the demographics, more so the number of children, the number of adults, the number of handicapped people. It even gives the opportunity for the fire department to determine if there are multiple languages being spoken at the scene. This will allow to get translators to the scene much more effectively and quicker. Once that's all done, the battalion chief will open up the camera within the app and be able to take as many pictures as he or she feels is necessary to give a good picture to the responding agencies. If you notice, there's the ability to annotate on top of any of the photographs. Sometimes you might know what you're looking at, and the obviously person receiving it may not. So you can make those connotations there. Once that's done, simply hitting submit brings the incident to the incident command center, where it'll populate on a map as a blue dot.
Again, this is what we classify as a small wonder using startup and residents. So all this was done in less than a year through a competitive procurement process that, and the demonstration was done at zero cost and high risk. But if it proves successful, as it did here in this case, then we're able to move forward with Gruntify into contract based on availability of funds, and not have to do what we've done with demonstration projects, is put all the effort in, get a great idea. Now we have to go out to bid and share the idea with everyone's competitive competition out in the marketplace. So that ends our roadmap update and the small wonder demonstration of the Gruntify application.
Vice Mayor Jones? What? Oh, no, okay. Yeah. Mayor?
Thank you so much for that. It's a great, really, I don't know whether I'm more impressed by the actual product or the fact that we did this in under a year with existing procurement. I think obviously you're doing a lot to change.
Both.
Yes, they're both very impressive. So thank you, everyone, for your involvement in this effort. And by the way, I love the name Gruntify. I don't know how you came up with it, but yeah, it's cute. And by the way, Kip, you know, I know that you underplayed your role in that particular incident. I remember it very well. We had dozens of folks. I can't remember now, but it was dozens of families I know that were homeless, and I really appreciate everything that you and the fire department did in housing to get everybody back on their feet. That was a really great work in that case. Question about who has access. In an ideal world, I agree it would be great to get access to Red Cross. I know there's some of this information we have to be very limited in who we give this to, because we know there are ways of scaring people with information that is partial and not complete, and there's information that we know emergency responders need that shouldn't be out in the public right away until we actually have done what we need to do to secure premises and get people in safe places and so forth. But I would love to see this ultimately expanded so that all stakeholders, means also all victims' families as well, can get online and understand, hey, what's the latest update? So you guys aren't getting overwhelmed with phone calls, as we know. I mean, just thinking about the flood, for example, and just how much of our personnel time was spent responding to questions that in a perfect world would all be easily posted online to a webpage that everyone would be able to see. And that distracted from our ability to be able to get families back on their feet. And I'm wondering, are there ways in which we can cherry pick information that we know we'd need to hold back that's only for emergency responders, but push everything else out so that would be open to the public?
Ken, I believe I remember from some of the demo work you provided us that there's the ability to, as people come in, to have them give them access to some more restricted fields and such and such. Can you give a sense of how that might approach as we scale out, first to partners like the Red Cross, and then to ultimately the potential for actually involving the public in this kind of work?
Sure. Within the platform itself, every user has the ability to have their restrictions set. So whoever is managing it, if it's the housing department, with regards to all of the stakeholders, each person literally can have a different tier or level of information that's granted to them, and you guys have access to handle that internally. It doesn't need to be done with us.
Great. So we just
Role-based
just a matter of
permissions all the way.
just adjust the settings.
Yep.
Okay, that's really exciting.
I'm very
Also,
pleased to
just
see
wanna
a
give
lot of the
big
green
kudos.
and not so much yellow and red on the roadmap. So excellent work on that. I can't help but feel a little bad for Snapchat for having their features be caramelized, again, with drawing on the pictures. But at least they still have cat ears and whatnot. On the Gruntify, I was wondering, can we use that with some tweaks to kind of make that a citywide CRM in essence? Because I've heard rumblings that, you know, since I've first started as a council member, that the city is going to have a citywide client relations manager, and so I held off on purchasing one. I'm up for re-election now, and we still don't have one. So my thinking is, you know, if there's a fire, there's some sort of earthquake or disaster in the city, and we're using Gruntify to kind of work across departments to do that. From a traditional client relations management software thing, you're trying to keep track of how many times like Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones calls, but that doesn't really matter so much to me as a council member. It really matters more, you know, what are the hot spots in my district? Where is illegal dumping happening? Where are the sidewalks that keep buckling, et cetera, et cetera? And I kind of see an application less for emergencies, more so just more mundane, creating a heat map across departments if, you know, different levels of access. DOT wants to fix the pothole. I want to know the pothole's fixed, but I also want to know that, you know, I have one vigilant resident who keeps on driving around and reporting these things. So that kind of thing. Rob?
Yeah, so there actually has been a long-term conversation about the use of the CRM and My San Jose as that platform. It is very much service-based in the requests that are made, and there are CRM tools in all of the council offices. The discussion that's we've had with the city clerk's office and with council offices is maybe now's the time and the opportunity to start consolidating that and making a platform that reaches all council offices and gives you more active information. The dream was My San Jose 2.x would be more of that opportunity. It's obviously taken longer than we'd hoped, but it actually still is on our dashboard. And based on your feedback, maybe that's a conversation we escalate and say maybe now's the time to start talking.